May Cry. My love for this series started very recently compared to the longtime fans. I got all the games gifted to me about a year ago, and I really only started binging through them in the last 4 months as an escape from math and physics. I played the first three and started the fourth. I've read the DMC manga, and I saw the 2007 anime, so as the Netflix show released, I was ready for more DMC content. Unfortunately, I found the show to be really disappointing. I wasn't a fan of the show's atmosphere. I was unhappy with a lot of the lore changes, and the characterization seemed really off to me. Of course, I will also have to talk about probably the most controversial scene in the show, but I want to wait until the end since I want this to be a fair review. And in the essence of fairness, I'll talk about the good things that I liked about the show before I get to the bad things.
I can already tell. Looks like this is gonna be one hell of a party!
To start things off, the animation was honestly quite good. There are a few 3D models, but the show uses what I've decided to call stylized 3D models, which basically means that while they're 3D models, they're still colored and shaded like they belong in the show. The 3D models aren't on Attack on Titan or even Bleach Thousand Year Blood Wars level, but it's still good enough that it didn't break my immersion in the show, and not to mention that the best of the animation more than makes up for the 3D models in my opinion. Another thing I want to praise the show for is the White Rabbit. While the White Rabbit had a brief appearance in the DMC3 manga, he gets a lot more attention in the show. His screen presence is pretty menacing most of the time, and what sells him apart from his design is the amazing voice acting that went into him. His voice actor did a genuinely great job with this character, and while I do think that the White Rabbit's ending wasn't great, that's much more of a story issue for me than it was a character issue. Even apart from the White Rabbit, the voice acting in general is just really, really good. I was really pleased to hear Kevin Conroy voicing Vice President Baines, and it was a welcome surprise. I also did enjoy Enzo in this, from his dynamic with Dante down to his death taking a blade for Dante. He was one of my favorite parts of the show. Unfortunately, that's all I can really say in regards to the stuff that I liked in the show. I think the show would have been much better if it was its own original thing, but the fact that it's tied to the DMC name means that it does have the baggage that comes with it. So now with the good out of the way, let's move on to the stuff I didn't like. When I think Devil May Cry, I think an old castle teeming with monsters, an eerie town full of danger, a tower rising above a city, and more recently, a church and a castle in a snowy mountain. Devil May Cry to me has exuded this gothic and supernatural aura, and the show doesn't really capture that at all. The environment doesn't seem like a Devil May Cry story would happen in them, and the outfits don't really fit it either. I mean, what the hell's with the techno armor? Taking it a step further, the show does something that I really hate when dealing with supernatural and magic elements, and that's trying to explain everything with science. They use quantum physics mumbo-jumbo to explain the separation of the human world and the demon world, which just makes me cringe. On top of that, demons are apparently evolutionary branches of Homo sapiens, which is just a dumb explanation to me. You mean to tell me that if I had evolved differently, I would be able to shapeshift into anyone? Or that I would look like this? Then, of course, there's the anti-demon bullets. They explain this by saying that the green stuff targets the DNA of demons, but this would have been made so much easier if they just said it was fucking holy water. It already exists in the DMC universe. We didn't need to come up with a new liquid that hurts demons. Just color the liquid differently and boom, holy water. Oh, Jesus Christ, watch the green stuff be made holy water in the next season. This constant need to scientify everything supernatural in media is honestly starting to get on my nerves. The wrong setting and designs, coupled with the erasure of the supernatural and magical, just kind of ruins the atmosphere for me, and it makes this Devil May Cry show not feel like Devil May Cry. Even with a bad atmosphere, though, a show's story can make it work. So the question is, does it? The story and focus of the show are quite bad in my opinion. It made a lot of changes to the lore that I just didn't enjoy. Like, why is the Force Edge just chilling in Vatican City? Why does Dante start unlocking his Devil Trigger now in this way? And why doesn't Dante know he's the son of Sparta? Look, I could go on with the lore changes, but I do understand it's a disconnected story that doesn't tie into the games at all. But even as its own disconnected story, I don't think it's enjoyable. White Rabbit's plan didn't make much sense to me, and at times it felt like the plot itself was bending to make White Rabbit succeed, as opposed to White Rabbit carefully controlling the unfolding events to make himself succeed. Okay, that's a difficult explanation. Let me rephrase. Basically, White Rabbit's control over the story felt much more forced and given to him by the writers, as opposed to it feeling like White Rabbit himself was doing it. I mean, what was his plan if Dante reached him here before the bomb went off? Of course, we also have the element of the story that says demons aren't all bad, which is an issue of itself. I think a story with the element of demons aren't all bad can work. I don't think that it works in Devil May Cry or the show itself, though. Firstly, in regards to Devil May Cry, yes, there have been good demons here and there. I'm not denying that. However, those few demons that we have seen have been very, very rare. In fact, the lower level demons that are in the games are genuinely the sadistic and evil hordes that we're cutting through. There also hasn't been a hint of any communities of good demons across the DMC media that I've consumed, or the hints I have not picked up on. So having entire communities of good demons in the Netflix show not only goes against the series and comes out of kind of nowhere, but I also feel that it undermines how special Sparta's choice was, because it makes being a good demon seem less and less special. Secondly, the show can't even fully commit to demons being just like us, because the demons that are refugees are basically just humans with horns, and then the demons that actually are the bad guys just look like normal demons from Devil May Cry. I understand visual storytelling, but this part of the show really grinded my gears because it seemed like the show itself was scared that we, the viewer, wouldn't side with the demon refugees if they didn't look sympathetic enough to gain our pity. Lastly, this story was marketed with Dante at the center of it, but the story itself focuses more on Lady. Having the story focus on Lady wouldn't actually be a bad thing in my opinion. I really like Lady in Devil May Cry 3, and I know that she's in Devil May Cry 5, so I'm really hoping that something good happens with her there. However, this leans into my next issue with the show. Now, I've always said that a simple or even a bad story can be carried by compelling characters, but a great written show with insufferable or bad characters will fall flat on its face. This show in particular mischaracterizes important characters in a way that I can't really look past. Dante's characterization is the best of the three I want to highlight. He has a lot of good moments that I can see Dante from the games doing.
What are you doing now?
I work better with music. Dressing up as my dead brother, a little bit much. Personally, I would have stuck with being a creepy baby. It was working for you.
But he also has a lot of really bad moments.
The way this usually goes is I do that, then drop a killer one-liner. But I'm drawing a complete blank right now. This never happens to me, I swear.
How the fuck?
I don't feel bad. I heal extremely fast. Like a superhero. Not that I call myself a superhero, but your mom does.
His strength fluctuates as well. 1 second he's contending with Nilo Angelo, and then the next his Devil Trigger can't even knock Rudra off. The same Rudra that Base Dante in Devil May Cry 3 manhandled at the same time as his brother. 1 second he's moving like Quicksilver in the Fox X-Men movies. The next he can't grab his necklace as it flies by right in front of him. So look, Dante's characterization, it isn't the best, but I can look past it because it is pretty decent in all fairness, and it's enjoyable to watch. Virgil's characterization, though, pisses me off. Aside from Nilo Angelo, we don't get much of Virgil in this show. He shows up in the last episode for like 40 seconds, but 40 seconds is enough to piss me off. Why am I pissed, you ask? Because Virgil is both willingly submitting to Mundus and calling them the one who freed him from his bondage. He then drops a reference to the I Am the Storm meme from Devil May Cry 5 before the show ends. Why is he seemingly willingly working with Mundus? This is the same demon that killed his mom, okay? Now, if I'm wrong, I'll concede if he's being mind controlled. But until then, I have not seen a single hint of him actually being mind controlled. Quite the opposite, actually. He knows his lineage. He's shown that he knows he's the son of Sparta with that conversation with White Rabbit. So until it's confirmed that he is being mind controlled or whatever, I'm still going to call this bad characterization. Now we reach why I don't like the focus of the show being on Lady. And that's because her characterization in this show is really, really bad in my opinion. First of all, she genuinely sounds like she was written by Vivziepop. If you took her dialogue and stuck it in Hazbin Hotel, it would not sound out of place at all. Lady swears more in this show than I've heard in all the games I've played so far. And her personality itself isn't any better. In this show, she's just unnecessarily mean to Dante. I mean, in the games, she showed more compassion and empathy towards him when she thought he was the one who killed Arkham and took her shot at revenge against her dad. In the show, she's completely dismissive of his past and takes pleasure in tormenting him with flamethrowers. I'm not even going to go into her actual writing and her acceptance of demons and her motivation without Arkham, because if I do, I will genuinely be here for over an hour. Well, it looks like we've reached the end of my problems with the show. Honestly, like, the show itself is just kind of like, I don't know, man, it's... What the hell is that? What's that noise? Oh, god damn it! And here we reach the most controversial part of the show, the last 5 or so minutes, where America invades hell to the tune of Green Day's American Idiot, a clear reference to the War on Terror from the Bush administration. Now look, I don't have a problem with politics and media. Politics and political messages and ideas can be used very effectively in storytelling to drive the narrative forward, but it has to be handled with care and it has to fit snugly into the story. If you want a better example of a war where the justification is only there to benefit the bad guys while killing innocents, then I would point to the Ishvalan Civil War from Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. Seriously, Hiromu Arakawa handled this plot point with such amazing writing, I cannot gush about it enough. The way it makes up the foundation of Scar's character, ties into Father's grand plan, and characterizes the Ishvalans themselves was all amazing. Back to Devil May Cry though, the reason that its political theme doesn't work in contrast to Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood is because the Devil May Cry show's theme isn't handled with grace and is very clearly forcing its message onto the viewer. I mean, you're not really being discreet when you're blasting American Idiot. This scene from the show reminded me of my issues with the political content in The Boys, where it's so on the nose and obviously pointing towards something from the real world that it breaks your immersion in the story itself. When I'm watching or reading a story, I want to be immersed in the story and its world. So when the writer makes a very obvious political statement that feels lazy and forced in, clearly referencing real-world events, it breaks the immersion I have in the story. That immersion break is my main issue with the final scene in Devil May Cry's show. Its politics were handled with just absolutely no grace whatsoever. Look, my final thoughts are that the show itself isn't bad, and it would be good if it was its own original thing, but it's not. It's tied to the Devil May Cry name, and it made too many lore changes. Its characterization wasn't great, and to be entirely honest, even the show's story itself was just not very strong in my opinion. The political messaging was also quite boring to me, and I didn't really care for it all that much. But, looks like that's all the time I have for today, so I will see you all later.